we couldn't talk about Cork or the history of Cork without mentioning Annie Moore. Has anybody ever heard of Annie Moore? You've been there. You've seen her statue.
Saw her statue.
You did, and her two brothers.
Yeah.
So Annie Moore was the first immigrant to be processed through Ellis Island on the 1st of January 1912.
She's somebody's grandmother.
Not 12, no. What year? Come on. Oh dear. That's terrible that I have to look that up. You'd think I would know that.
I know. It's just a shame the way you're deteriorating.
It is just awful. Just awful. Somebody help me out here. Maybe I didn't get it. 1891. So there. Just a little bit of American trivia.
So that's when it started, 1891.
Correct.
It went through 1920.
21, 22, I don't know. But anyway, yeah. So Annie Moore was on the 1st of January, 1891. So she has that distinction, and as you probably know, they have a statue to her now in Cove, which was opened by Mary Robinson, I remember, in 1993. Remember when she went down and dedicated it. So that was quite a...
It is a fabulous museum.
Yeah, isn't it ever? It is really, it's one of the really must-see places in Ireland, I think, for an American, if your mother came from Cork, your grandmother came from Cork. But the numbers that went through that quay there and left that little piece of holy ground.
Before that, with the famine immigration flowed through there too.
Oh, that was the major jumping off point for the famine ships, because that's where all the ships were coming in and bringing out the butter and everything anyway. So the captains knew that harbour very well. Oh, that was just wall-to-wall ships in there. When you consider that there was 2 million people immigrated out of Ireland, and very many of them out of, in between 1848 and 1850, that we know of, I mean, maybe more besides, that's an awful movement of people. That's a tremendous amount of movement of people in a very short space of time.
25% of the population, probably.
Yes, it must have been. But like the sheer push and shove onto those small boats, and the number of ships and boats and whatever that went out of that harbour, it must have been just awesome. It must be an awesome thing to see. It wasn't just a ship once in a while, it was like a constant trail of them. Talk about a trail of tears. So, and it sucked out some of the very best people we had, those that survived. And of course, so many famous Americans had grandfathers or grandmothers came during that period, including Henry Ford's grandmother, and actually grandmother and grandfather. His grandmother actually died at supposedly in Canada in what do you call it, island in what do you call that island in
Prince Edward Island?
no, to my utter shame, off of Quebec.
Yeah, Grand Isle, I think.
Exactly, yeah, that's right. Grand Isle, and Ford was a very common name in the west of Ireland, actually all the way up to Galway, including the Aran Islands. Whereas, by the way, where Henry Ford's parents came from was the actual, yeah. So Ford, quite a common name. I assume it's Irish. I've never heard it anywhere else, but certainly associated with Cork and Limerick and Galway. So let's see, who else did we not leave out? So between coffin ships and prison ships and immigration ships, there was a tremendous amount of people who bade goodbye to Ireland for the last time, going out through the Cork Harbour. And the prison ships shouldn't be forgotten, because that was a huge outpouring of Irish as well during the latter half of the 1900s, most of whom went to Australia and South Africa. And
Why were they criminal? 19th century.
1900s, latter half of the 1800s. Yeah, thank you.
Why were they prisoners? Political prisoners?
A great deal of them were political prisoners, but the English, not having been terribly impressed with the job that nature had done during the famine that had left a number of them behind, thought it might finish the job by sending a lot of them to Australia as prisoners, mostly for poaching.
Property crimes are punished much more severely in England than crimes against people, I think.
Yes, that's true, because of course it's run by the property class. But in Ireland, the magistrate records show that the vast majority of people transported, as it was called, was for poaching. In other words, for catching hares, rabbits, or fishing in the Lords. There was no part of Ireland that was available to the peasant class who lived on there to even fish in the waters or to catch any wildlife. So, I mean, you were poaching the moment that you did anything other than eat what you grew yourself. And most of that went to pay the rent anyway. So it was an incredibly repressive system.
What were the punishments for those minor offenses?
Well, because they didn't want to pay for jails, transportation was the preferred. So that the records show that during that period, the magistrates were just piling the ships in, and obviously satisfying a trade that was already. It was like legal slavery in a way. What they were doing was they were populating Van Diemen's Land and Sydney Harbour and those areas with prisoners, and of course they were prisoners in the sense that they weren't coming back, but they were sent down there as prisoners, and yeah, and especially the women, and they were immediately put to work. So on a ticket of leave, they were given what's called a ticket of leave. And if you want to read that, there's a great book written by an Australian book called The Fatal Shore. Deals with that very well. It's the first real honest history about Australia. Australia was very shy about its history for a very, very long time, not until, I would say, the 80s, the 1980s. Were they able to write about or talk about their early history? They really weren't. So The Fatal Shore is one of the first books. It was heralded as one of the first books that really was willing to say it as it really happened. So a great deal of, most if not all of the transportees went out of Cork, and there's a great deal of folklore and songs, about the prison ships. The prison ship lay waiting in the bay. The prison ship is a very real thing, so that you have this image of the boy being convicted of something small, and his wife to be watching him being taken away, knowing that the prison ship was waiting in the bay, and that she'd never see him again. So the great ships that came in and out of there brought out an awful lot of Irish human beings to the rest of the world. So in many ways, the history of Ireland is written right there in Cork. Now, I was going to talk a little bit earlier on about the character of the city during the Middle Ages, and it's probably best just summarising that it was a typical European type city, in that the merchant class ran the city. So it would have been like a mirror image of Bristol. All of those cities, you know, if you worked and lived there, if you were a stevedore or you were a sailor or almost anything, you didn't vote, you had no participation whatsoever in the civic life of the city. Even though it had a charter and it had all of these wonderful things, that was all in the hands of a very small merchant oligarchy. Kind of like San Diego today. I thought I just left. I thought I'd just.
The Chargers wrote their ticket.
Yeah, I just found actually. I was thinking earlier on. I remember about when King John actually granted his charter, 1195. So I said at the very latest it would be 12 something,
Yeah.
but actually 1195.